I'm Kate Campbell, VP Advisory Services at York IE, a strategic growth firm. And we're so excited to be a sponsor and be moderating this panel. And I'd love to start with Ben first on the virtual screen to introduce himself as we get started on the panel.
Hey everyone, I'm Ben Javawi. I'm the founder of a company called Privy. We're an email marketing and text marketing solution for Shopify stores. We started in Boston and now we're a fully remote company. And we were acquired a year and a half ago by Attentive Mobile. Excited to be here.
Great. And Karen?
Thanks so much for moderating today, Kate, and for everybody for coming. My name is Karen Kelly. I'm the president at Tapple, also Boston-based. We are an interactive physical to digital data capture solution for brands and agencies. So we've had a pretty interesting trajectory over the last couple of years with COVID, and I'm excited to share some of that with you today. I will be able to give you lots of information about how to build the plane in the air while you're flying. So I'm excited. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Karen. And Raj?
Hi, Raj Agarwal. I had started a company in 2009 called Localytics, which was a mobile analytics and messaging platform. Ben was actually one of our very first investors. And we built that over 8.5 years to about 25 million revenue, and it was acquired in 2019. My co-founder and I started another company called Demand Sage, which was a sales enablement platform for SMBs. We ran that for a couple of years and then took an acquisition from Snapchat. I spent a year there, but 2 months ago, I moved over to AWS, and I'm their general manager of their sales and engagement platforms.
Very impressive. Now let's start with you first. You've done this many times. In your definition, what is an MVP? What makes a good MVP? And what are some of your experiences in promoting it?
I mean, what makes a good MVP is, first of all, something that's actually like the M part of it, right? Yes. It's really easy to overbuild, right? So this is like kind of the typical mantras of lean startups last 12 plus years, right? Like, get something in front of people quickly. Don't be hiding your ideas. Don't feel like unless you're like working some deep science, right? You probably don't have anything like that unique, right? There's other people doing it. And so the more important part is getting in front of people quickly and often, iterating as quickly as you can.
That's great advice. We'll go virtually. Ben, what it makes the definition of an MVP for you, and what is your example?
Yeah, I mean, I like Raj's response there. Right now, when I'm like coaching founders, I love the founders that are super scrappy and maybe don't actually have a software product yet, but what they're doing is using like Google Sheets, or they're doing the work behind the scenes, and maybe they've got a nice landing page that they're putting in front of target customers to test the messaging and see if they can close some deals before they get too far along on the product.
Karen, what has been your experience? And you can touch on the pivot you had with COVID.
Yeah, I think for me, obviously everything these two gentlemen said is spot on. I think also it's so important to have those early conversations with those target customers, because it's, those are the people who you're going to hopefully make your evangelizers, right? And who are going to help you go spread the word once this MVP grows up a little bit more. I think for us, it was, we started off, we operate in the physical world as a technology company, as a data capture solution. So, prior to COVID, it was like we were guns a-blazing. We were working with a bunch of experiential marketing agencies, and then COVID hits, and really everything goes down, lights out. And I can maybe talk more about this on a different question, but for us, it was immediate. We were like, well, our platform's super flexible, right? So when you're thinking about an MVP, like making it flexible enough, don't overbuild at the beginning, making it flexible enough to say, okay, can this easily pivot into something else if I start to get feedback that it's not answering the problem I thought it was? In our case, our problem essentially disappeared overnight. So what we said was, hey, we have this solution to capture data in the physical world. What's needed right there now? Well, what was needed was health attestations for folks going back to work, corporate offices, construction sites, TV production groups. So we launched, essentially quickly saw that need, said platforms flexible enough to do it. So we quickly launched a pillar, a health screener pillar for our product, which we then sold for about 18 months during the pandemic.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Now, how do you make sure when you're pushing it out to the market, Raj, that it's actually an MVP? Going back to your point about the M.
So my sort of approach is, you got to test your message, right? And you've got to do that in some form of scale. And so the way that I have done it is using email marketing, right? But like, a little bit of automation on it to scale it. But the idea is like I try to send out like 50 messages a day, right? And every day I look at the open rates, and like the click-throughs, and adapt the message and then the segment that I'm sending it to. And so I do it in a structure where I do a different thing once a day, just because if I do too many different varieties in one day, I'm going to get confused. And so I'm like, hey, I'm going after, I don't know, like HR executives today, and this is the message I want to try with them. All right, what did I learn from that? Tomorrow, maybe I'm still going to go after HR executives, but I'm going to try a different spin. Rather than being the best product, I'm going to try something about like cost effectiveness, right? And the idea is just you're learning, and then you have better focus on where to spend your time and energy.
That's a great answer. Ben, what did you do for some testing? How did you know it was an MVP?
Yeah, so I think as founders, you have this like crazy amount of pressure about like building the perfect product. And I think a good rule of thumb is like, you have to push the product out there before you as the founder think it's ready. And if you have that feeling like, oh, it's a little bit early, like that's the right time to be getting it in front of customers. And how did we actually get it out there? I mean, that's the beauty of the internet, right? It's 2022. There's a Facebook group for literally any niche in the entire world. I talk to a lot of our customers. I'll like just spitting out a few. Cat backpacks are a thing, right? There's Facebook groups for cat backpacks, right? If there's a Facebook group for a cat backpack, then like you can find your target customer in a Facebook group, or on Quora, question or answer is a great site for that, or Reddit threads, right? So find communities of your customers online that are talking about your product or about the pain that you're trying to solve, and add value with responses. Don't necessarily just push the product, but I found that combination of like finding the people who are already talking about this thing and offering, even to just get feedback for free to get in front of those customers was a great way for us to get our product out.
It seems that feedback is a huge part of making sure that the MVP is working. Karen, can you speak to some of the experiences you've had there as well?
Yeah, sure. In terms of getting it out to market, I think for us, one of the things we discovered early on as we were trying to decide, hey, do we go direct to brand or do we go to agencies, is sort of how can we get, again, the sort of most quality feedback loop we can, but on top of that, how can we sort of expand our reach as quickly as possible with the smallest amount of dollars spent? And of course, that's really important for investors too. So for us, what we realized as we were going through the process is selling to agencies made a whole heck of a lot more sense for us, because essentially what would happen was we would say, okay, they would essentially sign an annual contract with us, but they needed training on how to use the product, which we would do. But now we've turned our sales force from just me and a handful of other people to 70 people at this billion-dollar agency. So for us, it was more about it's a very specific market. It's a B2B product, not a B2C product. So for us, it was more like LinkedIn, and I'm happy to talk more about that too. LinkedIn has been a goldmine, but really using our own customers to kind of get it out there quickly for us.
I'd like to take a few moments to also talk about competitors. What do you do when there's already existing competitors going up against your MVP? How do you market against that? And I'll start with Raj because you're next door.
Sure. I don't worry too much about the competitors, right? Like usually in these early spaces, there's there's enough white space for people to find their zone. And so, be aware of the competitors, but focus on the customers. And often you think, you're head to head against this company, but really, like, one company ends up going more SMB, one goes enterprise, one goes, more service based. Like, there's so much variety in any space that's going to become meaningful, that don't worry too much, right? Be aware of them, but just don't obsess over competitors. Obsess over customers.
Again, obsess over the customers, not the competitors. Ben, do you agree? What is some advice you give founders?
Yeah. I mean, I love when there's competition because it means there's existing demand for your product. And one of the things that I do now, we're in a competitive market. These markets are huge because SaaS is now global by default. So I think, I spent time before we entered the market reading reviews, negative reviews of those competitors' products, trying to understand, like, what are the gaps? Maybe it's certain features that they don't have, or maybe it's how they support their customers is horrible. There's so many different angles. Or maybe they're good for enterprise customers, but not for small business. And that's what you're focused on, right? So, I spend time there. I also spend time talking to customers of competitors to get an honest feeling for, like, what they're good at, what they're not, what opportunities they're missing, what pain those competitors are not solving. So I think early on, it's helpful to kind of validate your idea by understanding the competition. But then I agree with Raj. Like, I've been working on Privy for 10 years now, and I don't think about competition a ton, honestly, especially the first 5 to 8 years of the business. If you're entering a big market, like, just focusing on your customers, solving problems for them, telling them that you just solved that problem, and repeating that cycle is probably the biggest thing you can do to drive growth in your business.
So Ben, thinking of that, really honing in on the value that you're bringing to customers versus the feature of an MVP, can you talk a little bit more of how you spent your time with looking at the customer pain points and showing that value versus some of the features that you might have been working on?
Yeah. So, I mean, Privy, it's a long history. I'll try to keep it short, but we entered the email marketing space, right? I mean, Raj knows how competitive that is. There's, well over 200 players: MailChimp, Constant Contact, Klaviyo, I mean, you name it. And we talked to customers and we realized that none of those players offered great tools to grow your email list. And people really understood the value of email marketing. They made revenue, like Raj was saying, when they sent emails. So if they could grow their list, that would be really great. So Privy, we anchored around that value prop, and then we built features that supported just the idea of growing your list. And that was our wedge into this super crowded market. And that product alone got us to $4 million in revenue. And then we figured out who we are, what our values were in our segment of the market. And we found additional opportunities to expand beyond that initial wedge. But, that was a pretty critical, learning for us early on. That was all kind of what I would describe as part of this MVP phase.
Karen, what's the best ways to show the differentiators to competitors and to customers when focused on promoting the MVP?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure if it was Ben or Raj who said it, but this idea of, like, what can you offer that they are not? And really just kind of, if that pain point is big enough, just kind of really rolling around in that pain with your customer, your potential customer, right? Because if you're talking to the right person and you are trying to solve something that they're trying to solve also, then really whatever you're adding should be big enough to go ahead and, get you a decent chunk of that market size. I also think in general on the topic of competition, I appreciate what Ben said a lot in terms of competition means that the market is valid. I think, and for us, as we, 4 years ago, we started this company moving into this whole idea of like physical to digital. Many of you in the room may have heard of that already, but that was not really a phrase 4 years ago. Now it's kind of morphed into something called phygital. And so the question back then was this going to become a thing where essentially we can start interacting in the physical world and sort of gathering data and understanding the context of interactions better there? And one of the primary mechanisms we use to engage folks, or that our customers use through the platform to engage folks, is QR codes. QR codes were dead 4 years ago. They're back now. And so we really have COVID to thank for that, in a bizarre twist of things. But really for us, it was under like that competition and how it's grown over the last 18 months is really great for us. I really see it as a very positive thing because, from our perspective, there's 2 or 3 different things that we offer that no one else does. But for us, we're in the middle of fundraising to be able to go to investors and say, hey, these guys are a competition. They raised $90 million. These guys are a competition. They raised $47 million. This is a valid market, even though it's a new one.
Now, tactically speaking, how do you launch an MVP? What are some of your expansions in doing so?
There's a bunch of common ways to do it, right? Like Product Hunt, AppSumo, you got a press release associated to this, right? But I think some of the ideas, you're typically thinking about how do you create some kind of a bang that has like accelerating effects to it, right? And so the typical thing is you do multiple things at the same time to amplify your message. So if you got a press release combined with the Product Hunt, combined with maybe like an AppSumo to follow it up, and you hope for sort of amplifying wave, and then you ride that to try to get to your next milestone of customer growth, and then start the whole challenge over again of figuring out what you need to actually deliver to that group of people.
What was a time that was a really successful launch for you when you were doing it?
So I think for us, like Localytics coming out of Techstars, we sort of chose that moment to do our launch, right? So we had a press announcement that could make it to TechCrunch. We had the Techstars sort of demo day in the Boston community. We leveraged that for, I think it was, like I can't remember, it was Boston Globe or something article. And that sort of gave us a nice boost in our user numbers. And then it was, of course, up to us to like capitalize on that. And most importantly, focus on retention of those new people. But I think that was it felt like an inflection point for us, where we went from probably like 300 or 400 users to over 1,000 over like a couple months.
And that gave you more customers to then get feedback from.
Exactly, which is the important part.
Exactly. Yeah. Ben, how about yourself and Privy?
So probably for most people in the room, you're launching without an existing customer base or audience. I never had a successful version of that. So, I would say like take the pressure off of yourself and just have your product out there and start finding customers outbound, online, whether it's like the cold emailing, like Raj was suggesting, or reaching out on LinkedIn, or finding communities of these people that exist already and tapping into those. But I'm a big proponent of like the earlier you start talking about your product, the earlier you let people use it, the better. And then where we did have successful launches was, when we already had a couple hundred or a couple thousand customers, and then you can introduce a second product to them. Like for us, it was our email marketing solution. And that is a very different position to be in. So, I take the stance of like, you're probably not Apple. Privy was never Apple. And product launches for us, we always handled a little bit differently.
Yeah, just, I guess clarifying, like the product launch does not have to be when you actually put your product out there to the market, right? You should be doing that, like we said a bunch of times,
every single day.
Quickly. Product launch is more of a marketing effort, right? Because you get the juice of like attention, and yeah, you need to know exactly who you're going after, what message you want to tell to that market, and have the ability to, like, if you get a bunch of inbound and you don't know what to do with that inbound, right? It's kind of wasted. So you want to have your funnel like set up to capture those folks, retain those folks when you do your quote unquote launch.
So building it as early as possible and then having everything in place so that when you do launch, you have that audience.
Yeah.
Karen, do you want to weigh in as well?
I think these guys mainly covered it. I think the biggest thing is those early people, right? Is like those are the people that you're going to want to go out there and be your evangelist. So those early people, before you ever are out there, really kind of setting up those funnels, making sure that they are so totally happy and that they would be willing to go to bat for you 100% of the time, to go out there and spread the word about how your product is changing something significant about their business or their life.
And that's a great point. One of the questions we talked about is, how do you know if your message is resonating? Going back to customer feedback, do you change some of the features? How do you handle some of the feedback that you get when you're looking through the customer responses or the traction? And I'll go to Karen for that.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So really, you've got to look at volume to a certain degree, right? Number one, you've got to make sure you're talking to the right person, because if you're not, you're going to get feedback which is invalid. And then I think, what we always say internally is, like, if we hear it from 3 different people, then we need to address it. So I think that's important, that you're not sort of super jumpy about going ahead and making updates to your product. But on the other hand, if it becomes a consistent theme, then absolutely it needs to be addressed. It's tricky to thread that needle, I think, sometimes too, especially as a founder, where it's like a push and a pull. You have this idea about what you want the product to be and what you want it to deliver. On the other hand, you really need to make sure that you completely understand the market, because likely you're missing something, right? We don't know what we don't know. So that's how we approach it.
Great. And what are some of the best ways to show your MVP as you continue to add more features and different values to it? Ben.
I'll grab that.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate to spend time with Ben Chestnut, the founder of MailChimp, and he told me this thing that really, sticks with me. It was basically, talk to your customers, ask them what they need from you. If you hear the same thing, kind of like Karen was saying, from 5 or 10 of them, go build it, write a blog post about it, email that blog post to everyone that asked you for it, but also your entire customer base, and repeat that cycle. And he said for MailChimp, which, they were just bought for, I think it was like 12 billion by Intuit with no venture capital money, that was MailChimp's play, right? There was no fancy kind of product launches or anything like that. It was just listen to customers, build what a lot of them are asking for, then don't forget to tell them about it. And that cycle drove their growth. And I've found for Privy, anytime we are like in a really short cycle doing that, we're growing really quickly. And then when we, are slowing down, like, it's because we are getting in our own way of that cycle, honestly.
Ben, just to add to that, it's funny, we actually talk about MailChimp's early approach and Ben Chestnut frequently over here, because in a lot of ways our product is similar to theirs. So I appreciate that add, and this idea of, you could look at MailChimp, right? It is kind of astonishing when you look at what they sold for and you think, don't they just do email marketing? But it's absolutely incredible what they did. And like you said, without even any VC funding. So anyway, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Raj, you want to weigh in?
No, I think effectively covered, so I don't have much to add.
Do we have questions from the audience?
Yes, so we have a couple of virtual questions actually that have streamed in so far. One is actually specifically for Raj. It says, what platform did you use to send your 50 daily emails?
So first let's start with the data side of it, because I think that was the more important, right? And I used Apollo to figure out who I want to send to, and you can like use it to like segment out like certain groups of people, certain titles, etc. And then on the email side of it, right? I'm trying to remember the name of the product. I mean, I've used like MailChimp to do it, right? Initially, I think I ended up moving to something else that was like with help of my marketing person. I'm forgetting the name of the platform, but we only went to it because it's cheaper. So you can certainly use like a MailChimp, right? Or if you're a little more sophisticated, you can just deliver it directly through SendGrid. But there's a number of these like email platforms.
Alrighty. Next question that we have in the Q&A is, how valid is the idea that you get only one shot with fickle customers? So how do you time the pulling of the trigger on a launch versus building up enough value perception in your features and message?
I don't think that you just get one shot with a customer. That's been our experience. I mean, we have a lot of boomerangs that maybe they tried our product early and it wasn't a good fit for reason XYZ, and they come back a year later because they saw an announcement that we had it. So I think yeah, you want to put forth something that customers can get value from first and foremost, and that hopefully you're at least semi proud of. But I think most markets are going to be large enough these days and global, unless it's like an enterprise product, that you should have an opportunity to hopefully correct whatever that experience was if it's not great off the bat, or plenty of other customers. So I wouldn't get too hung up if you have some negative early customer reactions. I would take those to heart if they're a good fit, but I'd pick your head up and move on. That happens a lot.
Ben, how do you create a space for customers to give that feedback? You've talked about it a few different times. What are some of the ways that you're getting responses, positive or negative?
Yeah, so early on, there was a few ways. We actually, I wanted that feedback. So we put a live chat widget inside of our dashboard experience. And so people would just pull it up and start talking, and I would be the one on the other end of that. And I found that really valuable as a way to learn, to keep me close to the customers, and to make sure that our product team had that context. So a lot of it would come through live chat. And then in our dashboard, we had a spot where you could click and just submit a feature request, or send us a message, almost like a contact form, right? So there's so many different ways to do it, or you could sometimes we used to do like invite 20 power users to a Google Hangout and just talk to them, and maybe they had good ideas or complaints or whatever, right? So I think most of what we did wasn't too formal or fancy, and we ended up getting, or had no costs associated with it.
Awesome. Do we have any in-person questions? Awesome. I'll walk the mic to you. Yep. This way our virtual audience can hear.
So, of course, I really like the idea of listening to your customers. The question is there a risk in listening to customers that you have one or two who are very loud and who want features that may or may not be of use to a broader base, and you've spent a lot of time and energy working on those features that, again, don't appeal to a broader base?
I can start. This is where I think having some product vision, right, comes in. And there'll sometimes be feedback that's counter to your fundamental product vision, and you have to know where that's like not what you want to work on, because you've got some hypothesis on the market that unless you like refute it, right, like you're still going after that. Like just to make that a little more real, you might be trying to build a service for enterprise and like you're getting all this SMB feedback, right? This is a simplistic example. And you know, you are going after enterprise because you worked in that space, you know the needs of that market, and you feel like you've got your team is also built for enterprise, and you're getting all this feedback that will take you to the SMB, and you've got to just sort of be confident enough to say, no, this is our product vision. So this stuff, great. Somebody else will go build that. What is the stuff that's aligned to, you know, where we have that vision? And I think like customer feedback is super, super important, but also a sense of product vision, you know, some path of where you're trying to go that mixes with that is sort of what creates that sort of magic acceleration over time.
And Ben, you're shaking your head yes. So do you want to also add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I really agree, right? There's so many times where, you know, maybe someone moved over from a competitor and they're asking for the same features that the competitor had, but you've got that vision of like where you want to take the product and why it needs to be different. And that's important to balance. I also think that it's okay to lose a customer or to fire a customer. I don't know who asked that, but you know, I think early on it's painful, right? If you only have a little bit of revenue, the idea of losing that customer. But if you're spending too much energy and it's weighing down, you know, your excitement, just move on, you know, find others.
By the way, I remember the email platform, reply.io. Reply.io.
All right, I have another question. So the problem that I'm running into is that I'm trying to address a pain point that multiple demographics of users have, but I know it's, from what I've heard, it's not the best strategy to go after a general market. It's best to hone down on one. But after many user interviews that I've done, it seems that my product is going to be just as efficient for multiple different demographics. So my question is, how should I approach who I launch to? Should I still just focus on one and figure out like which one is the most efficient, or should I try and address all of their pain points?
The issue here isn't your product, it's your go-to-market, right? Like you can maybe build a product that hits tons of people, but you can't cost effectively usually sell it to like everybody at the same time. And so if you have a good sense of a segment, a buyer that you want to go after first, and you can build a little bit of an engine or a flywheel of getting them to take the product, use it, you know, and then you can sort of think about, all right, what's the next market? So, you know, how do you pick that one? You know, probably based on either where you're getting the most impact or where you sort of see a channel for growth. So like it was mentioned before, like, hey, there's a great LinkedIn group that has a bunch of these people, and I'm going to go try and get a bunch of them to use it, and I can create some scale there. So I'll let others add though.
I will add that we actually are going through that, or went through that fairly recently, because our product is sort of like, hey, you can use it on TV, you can use it at an event, you can use it in retail. And clearly we cannot tackle all of these markets at once. So we really had to think about, well, where are we going to land and expand, essentially, right? As part of the go-to-market strategy, you got to pick one. We ended up picking experiential marketing, and we picked that because we had the most traction with them and they had the biggest pain. And so for us, starting there made the most sense. And again, it's all a work in progress, right? We don't know. We don't know. Maybe we stay there. I don't think we will, but maybe we do, because we just find that we can service them super, super well and we can dominate that market. But I think thinking about like, where's the biggest pain? And then also, if you haven't already, thinking about, well, who sort of has the deepest pockets, or who has the pockets to pay you at all. So make sure that you consider that when you're thinking about, well, there's multiple sort of target audiences. Who is most likely to use your product quickly, and then who is most likely to be able to sort of pay you in the end as an industry standard.
We just to chime in on this one too, Privy had a really hard pivot. And before the pivot, we were like this great marketing platform that served retail, restaurant, salons, and we got nowhere because, like, yeah, the product worked for all of those, But until we focused in, like our case studies were all over the place, and a restaurant would look at it and be like, I don't care about, how it works for a salon. And then we found, like, as we got deeper, we chose retail and commerce. We realized there actually were certain workflows that were unique to them. And becoming the absolute best at one thing for one type of customer really changed the entire trajectory of the business and my life and everything. That wouldn't have happened had we remained broad. So it may have helped in the beginning to like learn a market and learn where the opportunity was. But to truly become a breakout, it took us focusing on one target customer type.
And I do see all the hands in person. I'm just going to toggle real quick to one of our virtual questions, and then we'll come back to our in-person audience. One of the things that our virtual audience is asking is, could you talk about how you'd manage this process for sales to large enterprise, government, or other customers with multiple stakeholders and decision makers? Ben, I think you may have spoken a little bit about differentiation between enterprise sales and others, so I'm not sure if you want to take that one.
I think we should let Raj, because he Localytics moved to enterprise. I don't know much about enterprise.
Yeah, happy to start. Anyways, I mean, at the end of the day, like there's a bunch of aspects to this, right? And some of it depends on, like, are you going in for a land and expand, or are you going in for like a big enterprise sale off the bat? And I think if you're a startup, right, the latter is almost too tough to pull off, and so you just got to figure out how to get into an organization with something small, and then build the relationship with them, stay close to them, make sure that you're getting the intros to other departments. Use your own analytics, like your own telemetry of your products, to see, hey, how many people in the organization are using it? Are there, to the extent that you have data about them, like what other people are using it? Can I meet with them? Can I make sure that I understand what they're looking for? Yeah, and just drive that relationship-based sale in order to try to expand as much as possible.
Awesome. Next question we have is, what are some key signs that it's time to pivot, be it customer feedback, revenue churn, employee turnover, etc.? And I know, Karen, you made a pretty big pivot, so I don't know if you want to start with this one.
Sure. My pivot was more pie in the face. We had no choice. but I'll say, for us, all of the things listed here, by the way, could be potential reasons to pivot, or just make changes, right? I think that's the biggest thing, is being open to change. For us, it was, our problem went away. So essentially the folks, like I mentioned, experiential marketers who, were doing activations all over the world, suddenly had nowhere to activate. So for us, it was a very clear, hey, this market is actually going to go underground for a while. What should we do in the meantime? And I think to Ben's point earlier about, like, there are Facebook groups for people like who love cat backpacks. We talk about that a lot, because we were like, gosh, if we were building a product that was just like, we literally say websites for cats, like, we would have been in big trouble. So I think like the idea here of, like, seeing the signs, for us, there was a big sign. We couldn't have really missed it. But I think also it's like this word pivot, I feel like it's been used a lot over the last few years. We all sort of have a different definition for what that means. I think maybe more thinking about at a higher level, the pivot is the pain that you're trying to solve just not actually there, or not actually that bad. I think kind of more on the day-to-day, it's more, pivoting is, should we build that feature? Or should we think about kind of like expanding capabilities in a different direction, or even, building an integration, that kind of thing. I mean, that's, it's part of this conversation. What do you build when? And those early customers, and prioritizing what they need. So I think the pivot question is, it's tough, because it really depends, and it does take someone, like a willing ear, to really, like, talk to enough people, get enough feedback. And I think that's what's really critical, is that feedback loop.
I think that's great advice. One other thing I'd say is, like, if you have a handful of customers, I would ask them, how painful would it be if your service didn't exist anymore, right? And like, it may be hard for you to read the responses to that, but if the answer is like, they don't care, then either your product's not really solving a true pain for them, or maybe you're trying to do it for the wrong customer type, or, you know, maybe it just wasn't a great idea and you need to move on to the next one.
Awesome insight. We're going to turn this back to our in-person audience for a couple more questions.
Hi. Hi. So I have a question that's the opposite end of the spectrum from the enterprise question, which is how do some of the things that you're talking about apply to B2C, similar or differently?
I think B2C is closer to what we do, which was like B to small business. You know, we talk about our buyers as they're just consumers. You need distribution. You know, you need serious distribution. And for consumer, you need some sort of hooks that get your existing user or customer to rope in a friend or rope in a family member, or, you know, tell someone about it, right? You know, for us, it was app stores, Shopify app store, BigCommerce app store, MailChimp app store. For you, app stores could be good on the phone, or different things like that, Reddit. The other thing that, you know, we've been doing a lot of these days is influencer marketing. So finding people for us that talk about how to grow a small business or how to grow their Shopify store, and, you know, making sure that person is a power user of Privy, even if it means giving them the product for free, so that, you know, even paying them to create content around how they use Privy and the results of that. So I think, like, you know, in consumer, influencer marketing is huge. And I think it blurs the lines of, you know, consumer and small business. So, you know, that's something that I would check out. But, you know, that same play of like finding communities online that already exist of your target consumer absolutely will work for you too, you know.
Hi, I have two questions. The first question is revenue or users. So early on, should you be focusing on, if you have a product that you feel like could generate revenue, users will pay for it, should you launch a paid product or launch a free product and try to get as many users as possible? And now,
Boston or San Francisco?
What type of investor?
what was that?
I know I said Boston or San Francisco. It's a joke because Boston investors have a reputation for being very revenue focused, and San Francisco investors don't care about revenue. It's all about growth and users. But let one of these guys start with the answer, and I'll jump in beyond that.
For us, I'll just say what we did. We built a freemium model. So, you know, before our pivot, I was doing cold outbound sales and, you know, was kind of frustrated by that. And when we found some pockets of really good target users, we wanted them to try our software for free, see value out of it, and have some upgrade paths. So Privy, you know, we've been a freemium model pretty much since 2015, and that's been fantastic for us. I think you, as a entrepreneur, there's nothing better than controlling your own destiny, and the way that you do that is monetizing your users. Even if you decide you want to raise investor money, revenue growth is going to streamline those conversations for you. But, you know, the beautiful thing is, if you have revenue, you don't need investor money in many cases. And I'm a big believer that venture capital and investor money is really not a good fit for majority of entrepreneurs out there. So the earlier you can generate revenue from your users, the better in my mind. And there's ways to do it such that you can still give away a lot of value on a free plan or a trial period before you're asking for value in exchange.
I think what Ben said is spot on. I also think we started off as a freemium model, but we've really moved. We're really in the enterprise zone right now. So I think part of it comes with identifying that target audience and figuring out, well, who's going to buy the product. I'm not going to give agencies a freemium, a free account, right? Because they don't want a free account. They want us to hold their hand and show them how to use it and maximize it and all this. They want customer support, right? So it wouldn't make sense anymore for us to offer sort of a free plan because our target doesn't want it. So it's helpful, I think, to think about it from that prism as well.
Sorry, second question, Raj. You mentioned product launching, press release is one of the ways. You mentioned two others. I didn't understand.
So AppSumo is a service that you can basically put your product on. They give it out for like a discount. I think a good analogy is like Groupon for like for SaaS services, right? So that was one, and the other one was Product Hunt. Product Hunt, yeah. So Product Hunt, press release, AppSumo. I'm sure there's lots of other things you can do, right? But those are the ones that we've done in the past.
We help a lot of startups do it from founder-led, meaning they tell the story, they make it a bigger deal by putting it as a launch and using their own network so that they're constantly out there saying the updates.
Okay, so I guess, thank you for asking that question. I had that question, if we should price the MVP or not, because we've been offering, so I have a mobile app application, so it's a SaaS platform for the construction industry. And I guess that's an industry that works a little bit different from, a lot of industries. So it's been a little bit more challenging in a way. So then I was wondering, maybe if it is free, it's not of value for them. So maybe we should charge it, but it's good to know what you guys are saying, and I guess it's a good way for us to start testing. So the other question that I have is in terms of features. So we have our MVP, and we believe it's more than an MVP. But then when we go and talk to customers, they always request like more and more, and if you have this or that. So until what point we should just stick with what we have and test it? And also how we can convince them that test it as it is, and then we will add the features that you want.
So some of it's about like, you got to hit some pain point, even if it's not hitting all of their pain points, right? Solve some problem for them enough that they're willing to try it, even if they've got 3 or 4 other problems. And sometimes there's an existing software platform that does everything, but that one problem, you got to do it better than that, right? And it's kind of like, you got to figure out one thing you're going to be best in the world at, right? And even if that's a narrow thing, make sure you're like best in the world at that thing before you're like trying to grow too fast. And so it might mean either your thing isn't narrow enough, right, that you are able to exceed the existing services, or that you just haven't done enough in that zone or in that 1 or 2 capabilities to convince them that this is worth having a new app or a new service that they need to learn and all that. So you need to make sure you get that differentiation clear.
Hi, these are such great points. So my question is about, as a founder, when you're starting out to sell your beta product, they say that, typically your first to 10 customers buy because of the founder's vision, not because the product, at that point, the product is not really in a place to be sold, but because of the founder's vision, these customers buy. And with that in mind, I started sending out email messaging. My question to all of you is, my potential customers, they are CROs, and this is an enterprise product. How many times do you, how many touches did you have before actually people picked up the phone and called you back? Because what I'm seeing is that they are reading my messages. I have a very good traction rate? I mean, I sent it to 40 people first, of which 10 opened it. And ever since, I've been sending them sequences, and they have been opening. In fact, I have seen them open once, twice, thrice, which means they're probably sending it to someone. They are seeing the value in my message. The question is they're not picking up and calling me. So do you have any advice, and what are you seeing out there if you can help in any which way?
I will tell you, I'm going through like a similar thing right now because we're sort of in the middle of a product relaunch, and I would say like those people that you're seeing that are opening that email 3-4 times, you're right. It probably does indicate some interest. If I were you, I would pick up the phone and call them. Don't be shy. Those folks who are like, you can see from the background, like there's something going through their mind. They have questions. There's a possibility. I would just go right after those folks directly and say, hey, you know, we'd really like to talk. And you know, and I would say for those people, for the CROs too, if you're not using LinkedIn, I highly suggest it. That's actually where I have my most, because I'm all about bottom of the funnel. I go straight to the bottom of the funnel. I'm trying to make a sale as fast as possible at the enterprise level. So I'm going after, you know, CMOs, head of strategy, head of data and analytics at different agencies. I find them on LinkedIn, and you know, you warm them up a little bit. You want to engage with them a bit, see what they're posting about, see what you guys have in common, see what, you know, essentially get them to see your name a few times, and then shoot them a note and say, hey, you know, you're at the beginning. So in some ways it makes it easier to say, hey, I've launched this product. It seems like it'd be great for you guys. Here's why. You know, we're looking for some beta users. Can we talk for 10 minutes, you know, and that kind of thing. I think then they see you as a person also. That's the other problem with email, is that, you know, you're just another email coming into their inbox. It's hard. You've got to hit them many times. They've got to build some kind of trust. You have no brand recognition. So from my perspective, I think it's better to lead with a more personal foot at the very beginning there, especially when you're dealing with the C-suite. So I would say go after those folks who are opening your email a bunch of times, but then also consider LinkedIn.
I would also look at that message that you're sending and put it out there on your own channels on your LinkedIn, because it's obviously resonating. So if it wasn't with that person, at least it's going to be with someone else, and you have it constantly out there.
Follow-up question. Raj, you said something about Boston investors versus San Francisco.
It was mostly a joke, but I think like traditionally, like if you go back, I don't know, like even 10 years ago, right? Like a lot of the Boston investors were more focused on productivity, unit economics, revenue, and in this environment today, like that's brilliant. Like that's where everybody's rotating back to. And there was a period there where like if you were more of like a product-led, that wasn't sort of the thing. Like, but if you were like going for big growth, right, and you were prioritizing growth over revenue, you were, at least the reputation was, and I think there was some reality to it, you're going to get more traction from Bay Area investors who are prioritizing growth. Now, the world has changed a lot in the last 2 years, and you know,
Joke still.
it's still a good. I don't know. I still think at least it's a stereotype that will persist.
Exactly. Awesome. We do have a couple more questions online that I just want to make sure that we get to. So the first one is, can you speak to building early buzz or social proof, whether a wait list or invites might be useful, building some sort of list so you have immediate users once your MVP is ready. And this individual did put the caveat on that they're pre-MVP or in their beta.
I can grab this one quickly. We see this a lot in our customer base. We didn't do it ourselves, but I think there's two ways to make like wait lists work. One is if you yourself or your co-founder has a large audience already, like got a big Twitter following or Instagram following or LinkedIn, that could work. Or if you partner up with a great content creator or influencer that's relevant to your audience to help with the launch. This is a very common playbook in e-commerce startups. You actually, what's her name? Kourtney Kardashian just did this a week ago, but she's got, you know, millions of followers, right? So I think it can work if you have an audience. If you don't, I would just say like, you know, might it just be better to launch the product, get it in customers' hands, and start that cycle sooner?
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. And the only thing I'd say is like when you're pre-MVP, right? You're not selling your product, you're selling the message, and getting people to provide their email addresses for a wait list or whatever is your form of validation, right? Like if you're not getting anybody to register, then you know that you're not quite hitting it with the right message. So it's an opportunity to refine that message until you see signups, right? Even if it's for like a non-existent product, increase. And it's the exact same thing as what I said, but like the channel, like my channel is email because like I think it can be very targeted, and I'm going after, you know, the places where I go after that is actually more in the SMB space. But you know, if you're in the consumer space, it might be more of like an inbound play to a website where you're trying to convey a message and figure out how many signups you get. If it's more in the enterprise space, you're probably like a bunch of direct LinkedIn messages to test your response rate is probably going to be more effective. But the idea is, hey, you got a message, you got to test it, see what kind of response and engagement you get.
Awesome. And then I think we have one more question that we'll have time for. And I know throughout the presentation, we've talked a lot about that idea of, I think sometimes founders fall into the trap of wanting to get that MVP perfect before it goes out, and how those initial customer reviews or comments can be really helpful, both positive or negative. But this individual is focusing on the idea of if those reviews come in and they are negative, or if there is negative feedback, you know, is that sort of the kiss of death? Or especially if it's public facing, how does, you know, a startup that's really trying to launch this product kind of overcome potentially getting that onslaught of negativity in the beginning?
Reviews where? Like, is it App
Yeah.
Store reviews? Or?
It could be App Store reviews. It's not specified in the question, but it's just, I guess, overcoming that negative feedback, whether that be through, I would assume, maybe word of mouth, or if there's anything public facing, being on social media, and those that are interfacing with the product might give it reviews.
My opinion would be that's overthinking it.
I think you still go to a restaurant even if there's one bad review. So I think it's minor compared to everything else you're building, and you can't get stuck on just one negative feedback. And I think as you build your brand, if you build it every day, you're adding more positive and more content that negative review will not tarnish the brand.
Again, it depends on this channels as well. But in addition to that, like people aren't like going out there searching for reviews of software companies, right? And also if you're working with a company to like, you're putting your effort into it and it fails, is that person really going to be like, oh, I'm going to go tell everybody, right? Like, you know, it's like, hey, they did their best. Like, so I think that's overthinking it.
We have a big review part of our business because we're app store driven, and so I can understand this. But one thing I would say, like, if reviews are important for you to get more distribution, we have like 25,000 reviews on the Shopify App Store, and a bunch of those come in negatively first, and it's really about how you handle it. You know, we reach out and thank people for good reviews, and we reach out when there's a negative review and ask how, you know, we could do better next time. And if it's something that we can address, we address it. And we find that we're able to turn around a lot of these people that are like, you know, if someone writes an angry review, like they're probably so passionate about solving the problem and wanted you to be the solution, right? And so if you can lean into that a little bit, it's probably a way for you to turn that around. And we've seen that happen, you know, hundreds or thousands of times. But I think early I would agree that, you know, it's probably overthinking it, unless like reviews and app stores are your primary source of distribution.
I wholeheartedly agree with what Ben said. I think that it's all about how you handle it. And I think it can be hard to come around to this, but like every single negative review, just think of it as a gift. You're getting free feedback from somebody who used your product. And now it's an opportunity to go back after them and say, hey, I want to talk more about this. Or maybe you can't fix the problem, or it doesn't make sense to fix the problem, but to be able to address it with them in the same way that they've kind of brought it to your attention. But you got to try and think of it as a gift, because if you cannot focus on perfection, I've seen it happen, and it's not pretty.
Awesome. So that looks like the extent of our online questions. Just want to open up one more time in person if we have a couple other questions.
Thank you. Going back to launch strategy and generating press, can you talk a little bit about the process of generating press and developing that relationship with the media for people who have never, experienced that before?
I mean, I think it's about research, right? And understanding who are the people out there writing about your space, that maybe your competitors, your general space, and understand it. And, kind of trying to gauge them directly to let them know your story, so that, the first time you're launching, it's not this cold email, you've never heard of you before, and kind of keep them engaged in the process. Similar in many ways to like venture investors, right? Like, you're most effective is if you're building a relationship before you're ever raising money, right? So that it's a known entity, they kind of know you, they can ask questions, there's a bit of a relationship built such that when you're ready to go, it increases the chances that they're going to write about you.
I worked at a PR agency for a decade, and we specialized in public relations and media relations. And part of it goes to your first point is do your research and know. And ideally, if there is that TechCrunch reporter that you want, know what they write. Also, give yourself time. They are getting thousands and thousands of pitches from anywhere from 500K investments to billions. So you want to know your story, know your messaging, start following them to have them recognize you, and do your research and really target your pitch to them to tell them like why this matters, and have some patience, be flexible with them. If that's what you really want, then you have to kind of play to how they work and in how much time that they need, where they're getting thousands of pitches a day.
One more thing I would say is like, sometimes it's like, hey, talk about me as a company, right? Like that's, pretty standard, but like, think about what they're trying to do. They're trying to show intelligence to the world about a certain topic. And so one way to do that is to write an article about the space, that's not self-serving. Obviously, it might mention you, but like let them have that or get their feedback on it if they'd like to have it. And they might incorporate a piece of that as their own, and that's fine.
Yeah, it's really when you start to think about the story you want to tell, how are you different? What's your point of view? And lead with that because you're solving a problem. So that should be the forefront of the content you put out there. And then, when you have that milestone moment of a funding or a launch, they've already seen your vision out there.
I agree with all that. We took a very different approach because I was never successful kind of getting press for Privy. We ended up, and there's a great book by my old CMO for Privy called Founder Brand that I highly recommend to people. It's like a couple bucks on Kindle or whatever, $10 on Amazon, and it's all about how to create your own media asset, and that's what we did at Privy. We wrote books. I've got a podcast that now does 40,000 downloads a month, only about e-commerce, which is our target market. So like, I would say if you are trying to get press and you're building those relationships, like that's a great path, and it is a viable path. But just because you're getting a lot of no's doesn't mean you can't go off and focus that energy on building your own audience around a subject matter of expertise.
Alrighty, and it looks like that's about all the time we have today.